Right. There we go. I did warn you, and now it's happening. In terms of what's coming up next, we don't actually have anything particular lined up next. So if you've got any ideas of anything that you would really like to see next, definitely drop some in, drop your thoughts into the chat. It could be like a theme that you'd like us to cover. It could be a type of workshop that you'd really like maybe you're a Scrum Master and you'd like to have like some kind of a Scrum Master kind of therapy session. feeling desperate and you actually need support. That's sort of, that's one of the things that this group is here for. So do have a little bit of a think about, or there might be a particular topic that is kind of coming up at your work that you don't know so much about, that you'd really like us to get a speaker, like an expert speaker, to come in and cover. Your ideas are really welcome. Also, if you've actually got a talk that you would like to test out in this lovely, friendly, kind and brilliant local meetup community, do let us know as well. We are absolutely here for you, and we'd love to kind of hear any contributions that you want to bring. Already seeing Yasin, all things DevOps. Yeah, it could actually be a DevOps. Yeah, maybe that's what people would like, is maybe we could be covering a few more things DevOps, and we can, as organisers, track down the best speakers on these things.
If you want something else, have something else.
Or if you want something else, have something else. Brilliant. Okay, so today we're going to have Sam doing his wonderful talk on the outcomes tree. And then after that, we're going to have a Q&A session. Oh. Lightning talk, some agile games. I'll be watching the chat and and hopefully not just commenting loads, but if you do have questions for Sam that are coming up that you're thinking about and you're just too shy to say at the time, do pop them in the chat, and us co-host Ewan and John and me will be monitoring the chat, so we can get those answered for you. So without further ado, let me hand over to the wonderful Sam Grayston.
Thank you, Jem. Hello, it's lovely to be with you all this evening. Looking forward to trying this out with this kind and friendly and supportive group as we're introduced. That's really nice. Let me just see if I can share this thing. So hopefully you're now all seeing something that says the outcomes tree, green shoots introduction. Yes, hurrah. Let me also make sure I can see the chat as well. Get that bit over there, put that bit there, so keep an eye on it, put that bit there. The screens of power. Awesome. Right, I've got everything, I think, where I need it. Let's get going, shall we? So for the next hour or so, these are the kind of things we're going to talk through. A little bit about me and the tree. So who am I and where does it come from? Where's this general idea come from? We're going to talk about the difference between outputs, outcomes, and value, certainly how I'm defining them for the purpose of the outcomes tree. Then we'll talk about what on earth this outcomes tree actually is. What do I mean when I talk about the outcomes tree? And I'll talk you through how it grows from its roots all the way through to its leaves. And then we'll talk about why it's a tree. It's a tree because it needs love, it needs care, it needs attention. And why that's an important differentiator over some other frameworks that think about strategic thinking. And then I'll just briefly talk about sort of what next, other opportunities to think more about the outcomes tree if you want to. But before we get going, before I tell you a little bit more about me, I would like you to have a think. And I would like you to think about a phrase or a saying or a mantra that you live by. So a phrase or a saying or a mantra that you live by, something that means something to you. When you've thought of something, just pop it in the chat. I'll be able to come on mic in a moment, but when you've thought of something, just pop it in the chat, a phrase or a mantra or a saying that you live by. And while you're thinking of that, I'll just tell you a little bit more about me while you're thinking of your mantra. So yes, I'm Sam. I joined BT at the start of this year from Nationwide Building Society as an Agile coach. I've been working with Agile and Lean teams for about 5 years, but coaching probably for nearly 10 years. And I like to make the distinction because coaching is a really important part of the work to me. I've done some coaching as training as an executive coach, an enterprise Agile coach, and I've done some training with Google on OKRs, and I think some of that's formed this. I've had a really random, varied career working in theatre and teaching and marketing and community engagement and all these kind of weird bits and pieces. But the common thread for all of those things is customer centricity. It's always about, any role that I've been doing has been about what's it been like to experience it? What's it like to experience the thing that we're making? And then what I feel like my mission is to do is to connect the organization with why it exists and the people who are using it, and then empower teams to do their best work. So that's a little bit about me and sort of where I'm coming from. I'll share my mantra in a moment, but before I do that, I'd love to come and jump into the chat and see some of yours as well. Okay, so John here, we've got be excellent to each other. That inspired, is that Bill and Ted? Or is that something else? Am I remembering that? When in doubt, do. Love that, Andrea, thank you. Sam, try to be better than yesterday. Hurrah. Every day is an opportunity, isn't it, to be better than yesterday? Darwin, prototype worth 1,000 meetings. Hell yeah. Ewan, is it good enough for now and safe enough to try? Yeah, certainly a mantra for our community, isn't it, to encourage for that. Oh, beautiful, Andy. Aim for the moon, you may fall on a star. Isn't that nice? And in fact, stars are much bigger and brighter and shinier, really. It's just the moon's closer, isn't it? Rich, iterative steps every day. Yeah, and they don't have to take any big leaps, do we? Phil, delegate. People often surprise you. They sure do, right? Nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. Yeah, wasted loads of time doing something that isn't any help. Companies only agile is the least agile department. Oh, yeah. Listen, absorb, consider, respond. Fabulous, cool. Thank you for sharing these. These are really helpful. Is there any that people would like to just sort of speak it to as well, or just say, oh, I love that, or something else they haven't had an opportunity to say in terms of their mottos or mantras for what they do? Can somebody confirm, is be excellent to each other inspired by something? I'm sure I've heard that before. Am I imagining that? No one's going to help me out here, are they? I'm going to have to Google it later. Cool. Go do what you do best. Yeah, lovely, fab. It is Bill and Ted. I thought it was Bill and Ted, but I just thought it was Bill and Ted. Yes, be excellent. Let me share mine with you as well. So this is the wonderful Sir Johnny Hive, big fan of Sir Johnny. Different and new is relatively easy. Doing something that's genuinely better is very hard. Betterness is certainly a core value of mine. The idea that we try and strive for better rather than just coming up with new shiny things every now and then. Actually, we look to better. So that's something that means something to me. And one of the ones that sometimes comes up when I ask people this question is this one. You'll be familiar with this. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Good old Forrest Gump. And I think one of the reasons that this mantra resonates with a lot of people is that it's a really simple, clear metaphor for what he's trying to say. He's trying to say something that we can all picture what a box of chocolates might look like, especially one if you lose the menu, or maybe you can't read, who knows. And you're like, well, I don't really know which one's which. I'm just going to give it a go. It almost goes to some of the things about what you're saying. If in doubt, do. You can picture it, you can visualize it. It's easy to understand. And I think certainly what I've been experiencing as I've been talking more about the outcomes tree with people is it's similar in its simplicity to understand. It's a similarly simple metaphor that people go, oh, I get it. I understand what you're trying to get to, and it provides a framework and a structure to organize my thinking far more strategically than I would have done if I was just trying to do it on a spreadsheet. So, you know, hopefully this is going to be a nice, clear, simple articulation of what I'm talking about. I always like to start with this sort of caveat. The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. So I'm going to make an assumption that you are all beings of first-rate intelligence tonight, being human beings. So this is saying, if there are things that I'm talking about tonight that you wholeheartedly disagree with, then that's fine. You can hold both of those things in your mind at the same time. You can hold the idea that I'm talking about and hold your completely opposed opinion and still function. That's okay. All I'm asking you to do is to consider, is what I'm talking about possible? So let me tell you more about where this idea has come from. This was the initial spark, the initial thought to get into the idea of crafting this. And it was born out of this question: well, how do you connect the big and far away with the experimental and now? And I was working with a diversity and inclusion team, and they had a picture of where they wanted their organization to be. They wanted them to be far more representative of the customers and communities they served, and they knew that the organization wasn't at the present moment. And they had these big, bold ambitions about gender equality, racial equality, you know, in their organization. And they thought we'd probably get there by about 2028. Why 2028? I don't know. But that was the date they picked in their mind. So they knew they had this big, far away, bold, ambitious thing that they wanted to achieve. And they also knew that they wanted to start incrementally, experimentally, now, not, you know, do some more assessment and packaging and before they get going. So the idea of the outcomes tree was born from working with that initial team and go, well, what thinking can we put in place to help connect the dots between the far away and the now, the big and the small experiments? And this idea has sort of grown over a number of iterations to be what it is I'm sharing with you tonight. It's grown and evolved quite a lot, and it's helped multiple different teams and parts of organizations. You can work with it individually, you can work with it in your team, you can work with it organizationally. It seems to translate no matter what your context. So that's sort of where it was born from. And before I get into it, I always like to start with defining some terms, because these terms get kicked around a lot, and I think it's important to pick what you mean by these terms so that we're all clear what it is that we're looking for. And just, you know, back to the point of, you may disagree, you may think these things are different things, that's fine. But for the purpose of tonight, I'm going to describe these terms in certain ways, and we'll use those terms to describe what it is that we're going for. But I always start with this thought of separating output, outcome, and impact. And I tend to describe it in this way. So outputs being the things that we put out into the world, the stuff that we make. This presentation is an output. That may be, other outputs might be the software that we create, the workshops that we run. So outputs are things that we put out into the world. And we create outputs because we want to achieve outcomes. And for the purpose of what I'm talking about here, I'm talking about a benefit to a user, a benefit to a customer or a user. So what can they now do that they couldn't do before? Or what don't they have to do because you've made it so much easier? So some sort of benefit for the user, benefit for the customer. And we want those outcomes because we want to deliver impact or value for our business. So by people being able to do something, that creates value and impact for our business. All seems straightforward, all seems nice and clear and linear. When I read it back the other way, you get to see where the shift in focus needs to go. So impact tends to be the clearest thing to an organization. Organizations tend to be pretty clear what kind of results they want to achieve, what kind of impact they want to make on the world. The measurable things like, I want to grow revenue, I want to have better customer satisfaction, I want to reduce the costs of running this business, I want to improve productivity, reduce my risk, increase colleague engagement. These things tend to be known and clear. But then when you go back one, with outcomes, we start to get a little bit fuzzier. We have a sense what patterns of behavior we expect to see from users that result in the business impact being met. So with outcomes, someone else is a bit on chat, so so with outcomes, we're talking about behavior change. We're talking about what people are doing. So if you think about something like Netflix, for example, they have a sense that if you are binging a TV show, if you are behaving in a way that's binging on a TV show, that's a likely indication that you're going to subscribe to their service long term, make them more money, perhaps tweet about what you're seeing and liking. It's not guaranteed. They might sign up for the free month, binge on a show and never watch anything else. But they have a sense that if you are behaving in a certain way, binging on a show, that you are likely to get to the impact they want. Outputs, however, are the fuzziest thing. They are the most unclear thing. We don't really know for certain what outputs make people behave in a certain way. We can't say for certainty that doing X will have Y result. So back to Netflix example, they can't say with absolute certainty that a particular show will make it binge-worthy. They have an idea, they've made shows before, they know what kind of things work for their audience, but they cannot say for certain that a particular output makes people behave in a particular way. So the idea is we need to focus on and maximize our focus on outcomes, because that's the stuff that drives value for our business, and minimize the focus on output, because that doesn't have a direct line to value. It's the outcome that has the line to value. So all of these businesses, as we well know, attribute their success to focusing on things like short-term outcomes. So outcomes is what the tree is born out of, that change in behavior. So let's talk about the big idea. Let's talk about this tree. What does it look like? So here's my tree that I doodled on my iPad. In the roots lives value, lives that impact, lives the clear, certain things that we know we want to achieve as an organization. If we do really well, this is what we get. From the roots grows our purpose. So in the trunk lives our organizational purpose, or our team's purpose, or our individual purpose. Why we exist, why we get up in the morning. Then these first big branches, I tend to describe as 3-year outcomes. So 3 years away from now, what changes in behavior, because they're outcomes, what changes in behavior do we hope to see? And those outcomes become an indication that we're living our purpose. Then the medium-sized branches, we go, okay, well, a year away from now, so 12 months away from now, what outcomes do we want to see? What changes in behavior do we want to see? It's an indication we're heading in the right direction for where we want to be in 3 years. And then the smallest branches on the outside there are your 3-month outcomes. So over the next quarter, what changes in behavior do you want to see? It's an indication that you're heading in the right direction for where you want to be in a year. That way, you've got this golden thread all the way through from your quarterly outcome through to where you want to be in the future, to make sure you're living your purpose and delivering value for your organization. That's the sort of overall idea. And what I'm going to do now is sort of delve into each part of the tree and describe a bit more about how we come to some of these articulations so that we can think more about that. So let's start in the roots. Value. Value lives in the roots. So these are the questions that I tend to ask teams, as individuals, people who are working on this before we get going, to think about what value they want to have in their routes. And it's just this one question, actually. If you do really well, what does your business get? If you do really well, what does your organization get? What do your stakeholders get? So these tend to be things like they get to grow revenue. They get to reduce risk. They get to increase customer satisfaction. We reduce time to market. We see higher quality. We have more engaged colleagues. We lower our costs. Any other sort of, I mean, if you've got any other thoughts, in the chat, plug them in the chat. What kind of things do you see as valuable? And what did your organization get if you do really well? So these are the things we tend to see, and these tend to be measurable things, valuable things. I definitely have plenty of organizations that start putting their output straight into there. So the stuff they're doing, and you're like, whoa, 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 sweet child of mine, not yet. They go straight into there going, oh, value is we've made this thing. Like, no, by making the thing, what does that give your organization? So it's definitely worth thinking about, what does your organization get? So increased efficiency, yeah, maybe one as well. Absolutely, something like that. You might have some personal ones in there about return on expectation or conclusion of contracting, market globalization. Yeah, why not? Whew, go after the world. Awesome. Yeah. These are the things that are valuable to your organization, the clear, measurable things that are valuable to your organization. These are the things that live in the roots. I would tend to say probably no more than half a dozen, because you want them to be quantifiable, clear, simple things that you can look at and measure and understand if you're adding value. Yeah, things like engagement, inside or external. Yeah, what's your reputation like? Stuff like that. Yeah, good, thanks. So that's the roots. So from the roots grows a purpose. Everything we do should be driven by a purpose, in my opinion. Purpose provides focus, clarity, coherence. A good purpose feels like a calling. It's a reason to get up in the morning. It's about starting with why. Any of you who know Simon Sinek's work will certainly know about the golden circle and starting with why. Why do you do what you do? When we understand our purpose, it helps to shape every decision we take from that moment on. And for me, I think it's really important to step away from those multi-line, semicolon filled purpose statements that you sometimes see and step towards bold, clear, simple, compelling statements of intent. So there are a few questions that I tend to ask when thinking about purpose. So maybe as I sort of scribble these down, if you have any responses that you want to drop into the chat, feel free to do so, or if you wanted to sort of call out anything that feels important to you, feel free to do so as well. The first question I like to ask people is, what gets you up in the morning? What's your calling? When you're having a nice stretch going, can't wait to do this today, what is that thing? To tea. My purpose is to tea. So with all of these kind of things, I'm thinking, well, is it to do what? To do what? I get up in the morning to do what? What are the things that, your 3-year-old may well be calling. But what is it that gets you up in the morning? I ask people things like, what do you believe to be fundamentally true about everything you do in your role when you do a good job? So for me, when I do a good job, I believe in optimism, for example. I believe that when I'm doing a good job, things can definitely be better than they are right now. I'm optimistic that things can be better than they are right now. Sometimes I'm not always at my best. Sometimes I'm not always doing a great job. When I'm at my best, I have no doubt that there is a better future. No doubt. So what kind of things do you believe to be true about how you work, what you do, your values, what's important to you? And then the third question I tend to ask people is, if you knew that your boss or shareholder, stakeholder would say, that is perfect. What would you want to write as your purpose statement? And that's an encouragement for you to step away from what you think the business expects you to write and go, yeah, but if you knew whatever you wrote down, they would say, that's it, it's perfect. What would you love to write? What would you love to write? And I use love advisedly, why not? What would you love to write? As a matter of interest, does anyone have a sort of a personal purpose statement or an organizational purpose statement that they really feel speaks to them or really resonates with what they do? Either drop it in the chat or feel free to call out. I'm going to talk through a couple of examples in a moment. Making people's working lives better. Yeah, nice, Nikki. Thank you for sharing that. Feels like a good reason to get up in the morning. Kindness always. Lovely. That's super great, Kerry. Yeah. Roughly help teams be productive and happy. Yeah. Really nice. I can understand that and get up in the morning for that. Fabulous. Thank you for sharing. I think they're really important. Quantifiable improvement. My purpose is quantifiable improvement. Yeah, nicely. Thank you. I'll show you a few examples, just sort of maybe a bit of inspiration for those of you who are pondering those questions and thinking, what might I want or what might be right for our team? I mentioned Simon Sinek, of course. Oh, I've gone backwards. Oh, no, go backwards. Ah, go back. Where's it gone? Okay. There we are. There he is. Good old Simon Sinek. So his purpose, to inspire people to do the things that inspire them, so that together, each of us can change our world for the better. Nice, right? Nice. And an architecture team I work with described their purpose. So why do they exist? They exist because design brilliance creates awesome customer experiences. That was a really nice one to work on with that team. They admittedly came to me with, they'd called it a vision statement, but it wasn't. It was a sort of half mission, half output statement. And they went, we're a bit embarrassed. We want a purpose. So we worked with them and they talked about love. They talked about design. They talked about awesomeness, all the things that mattered much more to them. Coca-Cola's to refresh the world. Mine, to liberate greatness in others. That's my purpose. That's why I get up in the morning, to liberate all the great things in other people. That's why I do what I do. A few more examples. Lego, to inspire and develop children to think creatively, reason systematically, and release their potential to shape their own future, experiencing the endless human possibility. Long, but I get it. It's nice. I like it. Heath Slaughter, he works as part of Simon Sinek's team, so to connect people and ideas so we live with more meaning. An Agile team I work with had a purpose to inspire change, or we inspire change. And I put Microsoft mission here because I'm going to go on a little tangent about missions in a moment. So Microsoft is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. I think Microsoft's gone through a really impressive journey over the last few years in terms of their coaching mindset, their purpose-driven mindset. I think they're really useful. So some examples that you can certainly have a look back on when you watch the recording, or think more about this when you're thinking about your personal purpose. And I'm going to talk about purpose and mission now, and what might or might not be the difference. And I'm starting with this question. This is not a trick question. So you don't have to be clever. You don't have to be esoteric or tangential. If I ask you the question, what's the opposite of winning? You would say, losing, unwinning, mediocring, not winning. Yeah, not winning, which is commonly defined as losing. Yeah, we're getting into the clever bits. So, tends to be 9 times out of 10 when you ask people what's the opposite of winning, they tend to say losing. Fair enough. I think if you draw a line between there and there, fine. If I were going to ask you this then, for all of those lateral thinkers out there, What's the opposite of winning and losing? What would you say? What's the opposite of winning and losing? What would you say? Not taking part, not trying. Community, interesting. Being absent, not playing. Being good enough. Thanks, Ruth. Getting there, being absent. Yeah. Giving up. Yeah. Again, 9 times out of 10, you ask people what's the opposite of winning and losing. They say not playing, stepping out, stepping away. I'd like to offer you a different or an alternative. Death. Thanks, Andrea. What's the opposite of winning and losing? Death. I'd like to offer you an alternative to the sort of, well, I'm just not playing, and to offer you carrying on playing, continuing to play as an opposite to winning and losing. So winning and losing being an end state, if you don't want that end state, I want to carry on playing as an opposite. And that thought is born out of my current interest in this book, which is called Finite and Infinite Games. It's a small book, but it's extraordinarily dense. The kind of book you have to read every sentence 3 or 4 times to go, I know what you've said, I just need to reread that 3 times to process what that means. So it's dense, but I think it's really interesting. So in this book, James Cass describes at least 2 types of game: finite games and infinite games. A finite game is played for the purpose of winning. There are known rules, there are known players, and the opposite is to lose. You know, there are titles, there are awards. You know, some of these things are sports, elections, wars. Participants obey the rules, the boundaries, they announce a winner and a loser. In the infinite game, however, the purpose is to continue play. So the rules are allowed to change. The players are allowed to change. The boundaries are allowed to change. They exist solely for the purpose of continuing the game. And I think that's a really interesting thing to think about. Certainly when we're talking about agility. So very often in business, you hear people talking about, we're going to win. As a business, we're going to win. Well, like, how? That's a finite way to think about business. Business doesn't finish. Like, how do you know you've won? What, everyone else has lost? You've got a magic title now on you're the winner of business? I don't think it works like that. I think business is infinite. You want to exist, you want to carry on existing. I think a purpose is infinite. You might win contracts, you might win clients, but business per se is infinite. So what I'm talking about when I'm talking about purpose is infinite. I think a mission may well be finite. So a mission describes an end state that you get to that is finite. But I think a purpose is infinite. So my purpose is to liberate greatness in others. I'll do that all day, every day for the rest of my life. I'll encourage others to do it. Why not? And for me, there's a beautiful and symbiotic relationship between value and purpose. You know, the reason we exist, why we get up in the morning, creates value. And because we want to create value, it creates a reason to exist. There is this really, say, symbiotic and quite beautiful relationship. So that's your roots and your trunk. So from the trunk grows the branches. And we'll talk about vision and multi-year outcomes. And I'm going to use these interchangeably. So vision and long-term outcomes I will use interchangeably. Because for me, a vision is a picture of a possible future. That's all. You get these vision statements that go, to do this thing for these people about this specific whatnot. And you're like, that's just a fancily worded output. A vision is a picture of the future. And these visionary leaders describe a future with such clarity that we can already see it, we can already feel it, we can already hear it. They're the kind of leaders that we want to work with and work for, the ones who can paint a picture of a possible future. The way I tend to ask people about this possible future is around 3 broad themes. So the first is about your people. What does the future look like for your people, your teams, your colleagues? What are they doing in the future? The second vision is around the products and services. So what are your customers doing? What are your users doing with your products and services in the future? Don't have to define what they are, but what are they doing? And the third is about your brand and reputation. What are people saying about you in the future? How are people engaging with you in the future? And these themes are stolen from another book. So let me tell you about Michael Hyatt and the vision-driven leader. So you can look up something called the vision script, if you want to, the vision scripter. Michael Hyatt's idea was, again, to step away from those really short vision statements and step towards what he calls a vision script, which is a long-form narrative description of the future for his people, his products and services, and his brand and reputation. And when he did it, he first did it, he was taking over a publishing company. And he went through this purpose of writing a vision script, and he thought it would take the company about 5 years to get to that point. They got there in 2, because he was so clear in the way he was able to articulate, well, these are the kind of publishers I want to work with. These are the number of books I want to put out every year. This is the kind of interaction we're going to have on social media. You know, it was so clear what his vision was. The company went, oh, right, fine, I know what we want to do now. It's clarity. So I'd encourage you maybe to have a look at that as a way of thinking about it. I have sometimes run this workshop and thought about people, process, and technology for outcomes as well. Can do if you like, I'm not particularly fast. So the questions that I tend to ask people when we're thinking about vision or outcomes are these. If we lived our purpose every day, what will people be doing in the future? This is a really nice tie back to your purpose. If that was true, if you did that every day, what are people doing in the future? I encourage people, when they're thinking about outcomes, to keep them active, to use verbs. You're talking about behavior. What are people doing? And with that, I also encourage people to avoid using are able to. There are dozens of things I am able to do on my iPhone. Do I do them? No. So if you're thinking about outcomes and value, you want people to actually be doing them. Just because they're able to use something, sometimes I think that's a bit of an excuse for us to be a bit slopey-shouldered on whatever we thought was the answer anyway. Avoid are able to. Talk about what people are actually doing in the future. And when you're talking about those people, refine which people they are. Are they your customers, a subset of your customers, the users of something, the stakeholders, the external market, your colleagues? Which people are doing what in the future? And my final encouragement when you're thinking about outcomes is to dare to use inspiring language. Go on, dare. So these are the kind of questions that I ask people to think around their people, their products and services, and their reputation. People will harvest. Well, that's a nice outcome. Nice. And celebrate. Thanks for showing those, Andrea. So then when you've gone through that process, you can start to follow the branches and you can let them grow. You can start fleshing out this tree. So you'll have got to the place where you'll have described value in the roots. You'll have a purpose, and you'll have these 3 big branches. You'll have a products and services branch, which is around your long-term outcomes for that, or vision, your people branch, and your brand or reputation branch. And then what you can do is follow it along and go, okay, well, 12 months away from now, what's an indication, what's an outcome that is an indication that we're likely to get to where we want to be in the future. And then you follow that out and you go, well, in 3 months' time, what do we want people to be doing? And every time you're going out branches, you're asking, what's an indication of success that we're doing the thing on the bigger branch? So this is not a guarantee tree. This is an indications tree. And we'll come to why that's important. It's important to grow from the roots up. And this is about linking the big and far away to the small and now. If we just start on the small and now, like sometimes we think when we're working with things like OKRs, and we just go, oh, well, what's the next quarter? We can lose the connection with where we're really going in the future, what our purpose is in the future. And then we can start to ask, so what slice of value would be realized from people behaving in this way? Because then what you've got is a really nice way to draw a line between each of those outcomes and bits of value from the roots. Now this you can use as an OKR practice. So you can change outcomes to objectives. You can change slices of value to key results if you want. But what I'm asking you to do and think about with this model is to go, well, for every outcome, look for a slice of value in the roots. You've already done the work to know what the results should be. So what slice of value would be realized if people were acting in that way? You may start to see leading indicators, so things you could see from this point, and some of them may be lagging indicators from after you've got there. But you want to keep those slices of value quantifiable, measurable, linked to what's in your roots. They are the result of achieving the outcome. So I'll really briefly talk you through an example. In my fake streaming company, some of the things they might have in the roots might be things like they want to grow revenue 10% year on year, they want to increase customer satisfaction, got a plus 25% NPS, they want to grow market share to over 40%. Their purpose, their reason to exist is to entertain the world. And they've got this vision here for their products and services. They're saying that their customers are binge watching the best content on any screen they look at. That's what they want people to be doing in the future, say. And if people are doing that, they think the results of that, the value they'll get from that is satisfaction with the content, growing their subscriber base, increasing market share in streaming above 35%. I'm making up numbers, who cares? So then what they could go is like, well, in the next year, where do we want to be? So you're starting from this point and growing out and going, in a year, well, let's say that 80% of our customers are watching at least 2 episodes of everything we put out into the world. That's an indication that we're heading in the right direction. The result of that might be that we're increasing our market share a bit, we're starting to grow our subscriber base. Okay, well, in the next quarter, where do we want to get to? So in the next quarter, we want half our customers to be watching at least 2 episodes of everything we're putting out. That's what we're aiming for. And we'll measure that through, I don't know, positive mentions on social media, an increase in market share by 1%. So you can start to see how this thing grows. And every time it's connected to your purpose, it's connected to the value. That does, however, mean you start to end up with these big scraggly trees that look a bit like this. So it can be quite wild and it needs some taming. And some of you will go, I need it in nice, neat lines and a table. So let me show you what nice, neat lines in a table might look like. You may be able to nest and align here. So you have the purpose and the mission described here, and within that lives the branches. So each one of those pale green boxes is one of the big branches. And then within each of those big branches, you'll nest the 12-month outcomes. And within each of those 12-month outcomes, you can nest your quarterly outcome. And that way you're starting to get alignment across and up. So you can find coherence and alignment in what you're doing. And within that 3-month outcome, you may have a number of experiments or features or enablers, things you're going to make. This is when we start getting back to outputs. Things you're going to do. So let's talk a little bit about experimentation for a few minutes. So again, terms, I always like to start with terms. Hypothe what? Again, these are things that kick around a lot, and I like to see people using their I's and their E's correctly. Hypothesis being one belief, I think that. Hypothesize, the act of coming up with hypotheses. Hypotheses, multiple beliefs, and the experiment being the thing that we're going to do, the action to test the belief. So again, these are terms that get kicked around a lot, that for me, I think it's just worth going, this is what we mean, this is what I mean by these terms. I've stumbled on this really useful format or template syntax to express a hypothesis. And you start with this, you would say something like, due to this challenge or this insight, this piece of data, this problem we have, because of this problem, we believe that doing this experiment and running this thing, placing this bet, will result in the outcome we want. So the change in behavior that we want. We'll be on the road to success if we see these leading indicators, you know, what things on the way may be valuable for us. And we'll know we've been successful when we see these slices of value, these things from the roots. And you want to set yourself a time frame for running an experiment. I have subsequently come across people talking about prove and disprove criteria in expressing the hypothesis, which I quite like, because I think sometimes when we say we know we've been successful when, you're kind of skewing yourself up to go, well, I'm going to prove myself successful, rather than actually approaching it without judgment and going, here's a belief, I need to test if it's true or not, rather than success. I think it maybe has connotations, so maybe we need to think about that. So that's a way or a syntax you can use to describe a belief about how you're going to get to an outcome. And then what that might look like is, well, you've got that, you know, that outcome, a slice of value there. Maybe you run a number of experiments. So we say we've got 4 experiments where we're running to test a hypothesis. We believe, you know, something's going to help us. 4 different things might get us to this outcome. And we're running these 4 experiments. And we start to learn that experiment 1, yeah, people like that one. Experiment 2, absolute shocker. Experiment 3, people love it. Experiment 4, they're like, stop, don't ever do that again, please leave me alone. And this tells us something. That's great, because we're like, well, okay, there's something in experiment 1. There's something in that belief, in that bet. There's something in experiment 3, that bet. And we don't have to do any more with experiment 2 and experiment 4. We just can them. You know, we've been running them for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever. Can it, kill it. Doesn't matter that much. And then we go from experiment 3, we go, right, what's a new outcome we want to seek? What's a new hypothesis we want to test? What are some new experiments we want to run? Which of these leaves will bear fruit? And this is where we get to the point of it being a living, breathing tree. And it will die if you do not tend to it, poor thing. It needs tending. So when you've fleshed out this whole thing and you've got these outcomes and experiments running, you need to actually start paying attention on which ones are working, which ones are not, and pruning and honing your tree. It's not a one and done tree. It's not a set and forget tree. And this is where I think, again, the visual metaphor works for people. If it's a strategy document, I feel like I can just sort of write it all down and like, yay, well, we're doing it for the next 5 years. Bye. We never look at it again. Whereas actually, if you go, this is a tree, we need to look after this thing. It needs pruning, which is our prioritization. We need to, you know, when you've gone through that exercise, you'll have hundreds of branches, possibly, in terms of things you want to achieve. You need to prioritize which ones are going to return the most value for you. As experiments bear fruit, customer feedback will allow you to think about your outcomes on a regular basis. So the feedback you're getting will allow you to think about which branches to grow more of, which ones to trim and cut. I'd suggest that every few weeks, you're looking at next quarter's outcomes. So you're looking ahead to the next quarter. Every quarter, you're looking at those medium-sized branches, those 12-month outcomes. And then every year, you're looking at those multi-year outcomes, the big vision outcomes. I'd also suggest that every time you get together, you start with your purpose. That's why you're there. And it needs to be a regular part of every conversation you have. Strategy is the overall picture. So again, this is another one of these terms that gets kicked around a lot. And I think people get a bit scared of and a bit frightened of strategy. And quite often people use it when they mean plan, and that isn't what they mean. The strategy is broadly, how are you going to get to where you want to be? And that's the overall picture of the tree. It's a strategic thinking tool. And then the last sort of point I've got on here in terms of tending to the tree is a question that, is there a place for love and beauty in this? And I think absolutely there is. This is a question, again, that came up when I was working with one of the teams that was thinking about their purpose and thinking about their tree. And they started stumbling down a route of putting in business bingo words. And then they stopped and went, we don't love that. Are we allowed to love it? Like, yeah, if you don't, why would you bother? Why would you care? I think there is absolutely a place for love and beauty in this articulation of what it is you're trying to achieve. It's so easy to get swept up in, you know, stats, facts, figures, metrics, whatever it is, that we can lose the humanity and the care in this thing. And again, the nature of having something natural like a tree to describe what it is that we're working on is beautiful. So I would encourage you to embrace that beauty, embrace that love. So that's a broad articulation of the idea. I will briefly talk about some of the things, you know, that I'm thinking about next, and then I'll hand over to you to see if you've got any sort of thoughts, questions, comments that you want me to go back over or rethink of. We've done this today. This is a free session. Hurrah! An introduction to the session. I am thinking about starting a Growth Academy group. So to work on actually growing this tree with a group of people. If you're interested in going through that experience, go along to theoutcomestree.com and sign up. It's going to, I haven't run it yet, but I think I've run it with teams, but I haven't run it as a group coaching thing. And I think it could be really good fun. So I'm working out how we do that. It's probably going to take place over about 8 weeks, so you'll be well prepped going into the next quarter. Alternatively, I'm also thinking about this sort of acorn to oak idea of one-to-one sessions, if that's something that you or your organization wants to explore. These are the kind of things that we'll be looking at, really detailing out what value means for you, what your infinite mindset is like, connecting the dots between the far away and the now. Thinking about experimentation, what experiments you're going to run, how you actually go through pruning and prioritization, and then a reflections and next steps. That's all I was going to share with you today. It's just about 7 o'clock, which is just about an hour, which is perfect. So let me pause there and see if anyone has any sort of thoughts, questions, comments, things that they would like to share from what I've talked about today.
So I just turned my video on, so it doesn't feel so weird. Yeah, I really like this, and I've seen something similar, like with like an opportunity tree, but it didn't look as nice, and it was more of like a Miro diagram, which I found actually really useful to structure thoughts like this.
Yeah.
But the problem is, like you say, it's the tending. So actually, have you come across any problems with building those habits within organizations? And sort of, do you have any quick tips on how to build those habits to be better?
That kind of thing has tended to go in contracting type conversations when you start this work. So if we're going to start this work, if we're going to bother, then it goes to the point of, well, every few weeks we're probably going to have to look at next quarter. Every quarter we're going to have to look at next year, so that it gets built into, this is how we're going to work. As if you want to undertake this journey, this is how we're going to work. That's how I've tended to find some use in it. Cool. Thanks for the feedback in the chat as well. That's great. Oh, there's a question here about feels like a road mapping exercise. How is it different? Might not be. It's a way that I've found useful to help teams connect the dots between where they want to be and where they are right now, which, yeah, you could describe as a roadmap if you like. It's the way that I have come about that challenge.
Brilliant. Lots of people just sort of saying how useful this is on the chat. I was just wondering, because I know you've been running the kind of outcomes tree stuff with people in BT. I was just wondering if there's any like lessons learned that you've got out of using this technique from now sort of actually running it with people as sort of almost like coaching clients.
Well, most of the lessons are in now how I describe it. So I've learned a lot as we've gone, and most of those learnings are going in. You know, you're seeing the most up-to-date version of my current thinking, my current iterations based on what I've learned so far. So things that have changed significantly include, it didn't have roots at the start. When I first did it, it didn't have roots, just started straight away in the trunk. So starting the roots. The purpose changed. It used to be just a strategic goal, which didn't feel as connected to why you want to do it. So I think purpose is better. The key results bit has become more clear the more we've done it. So it's gone through a lot of iterations. So the stuff you're seeing is the most up-to-date thinking.
Brilliant, thanks, Sam.
No problem. No problem.
I was quite interested in the, well, very interested in fact, so thank you for the talk, Sam. The infinite games in particular, and I think you said a certain aspect was infinite. Was it purpose?
Yes.
Which makes me think it's infinite perhaps until you decide to do something slightly different. And I wondered if, you know, the metaphor extends to deciding it's time to change, to pivot.
Yeah, and that's the joy of infinite, right? The purpose is to continue to play. So as it describes it in the book, if there is a threat to end of play, then it becomes a finite game and you're not infinite anymore. So anything that is a potential threat to that thing becoming finished is a threat to its infiniteness. So if it needs to change, if the rules need to change, the players need to change, the purpose needs to change in order to continue to play, that's encouraged.
Very interesting, which kind of implies there's a relationship there and a sort of a state change of things becoming finite from infinite and vice versa.
Yeah, so finite games can exist within an infinite game, but you can't have it the other way around. You know, we have to choose to play games, and yeah, there is a fascinating thing, and gosh, it goes into religion and politics and life and all those kind of things. Like, whew, it's a bit big.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's quite something. Yeah, it's quite something.
That's brilliant. So are there any other questions?
I've got I don't think it's, I think it's more of a point than a question, but
yeah,
if I may. I think I don't know whether or not this is my background I'm coming from, or I'm just stupid, but the one of the striking things which hit me when you were going through the tree was when you were getting to the branches thing. I was saying, you've got the timescales for one way around. The 3-month targets or action should be first, the branches, and then the 6-month target should be next, going out from you. But I've just realised that that is might be obvious to others, but that's it's most probably the wrong way to look at it. I think that because if you haven't met your, if this makes sense, if you haven't met your 3-month objectives by 6 months, then your 3-month objectives get squashed. That tends to happen in organisations. People just throw it away and go, "Oh, we haven't that hasn't been very productive. We haven't reached our targets. Let's get rid of that. And let's, usually what happens is that you go on and fail again. But by turning it around like you have in the tree thing and saying like, I guess it's emphasizing the iterative process, that you keep on doing the small scale, but that gets you, but rejuvenating it, growing more leaves, that gets you to the big branches thing. That is psychologically, that's seems to be a much better way of thinking of it. But up until you presented it just now, I'd never thought about it that way. Does that make sense, what I've just explained?
Yeah, it does, Phil. Thank you. Yeah. And what's interesting, when we first started working on it, we did the same approach. We started with the little, or the 3 month. I thought we were going to build up. Yeah. And it like I say, it never quite got there. It never connected in a way that felt like, I don't really know where I'm getting to. I don't know why. Yeah, the North Star is that. It goes back to the initial thought of, I know I want to start now. I know I want to start experimentally, but I need to connect it to where I'm going to long term, which is why it's sort of grown from that way around, from the roots up to the smaller branches. And you can come up with as many good tree or nature metaphors as you like, but the which leaves are growing, which ones are bearing fruit, which ones are facing the sun and lush and green, and which ones are diseased and dying that we need to cut off. You can play with the metaphor as much as you like, I think. But yeah, we started with the same thoughts, and it's evolved to actually start with the big and long term and work towards now.
Yeah, just by how you people normally diagram it by doing the envision it thing. You constrict the experimentation. You think, oh well, do a small bit of experimentation, but we need to be at point X in 6 months' time. So you by thinking about it that way, you automatically restrict the amount of experimentation that you may do. Whereas, like as you quite rightly pointed out, you want to be experimenting all the time, continuously.
Yeah. See which one's better fruit. Thanks, Phil. Appreciate that.
No. Thank you, because I think you've just fundamentally changed my mindset about these things.
Amazing. I'm going to quote you on that.
Brilliant. And it looks like you weren't the only person in the chat, Phil. I think, yeah, it's a really good point, and I think it's kind of helped. I think for me, it originally it seemed like, oh, we're starting over here, but actually it does, it makes sense as to why you kind of build it around that way. And Andrew has just said in the chat, it brings us to the fact that life and processes are rarely linear nor unidirectional. And I think, this kind of idea of something that's evolving is really beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. In that case, I'll just check if there's any other comments or questions or ponderings.
May I ask another question? I don't want to hog it. A quick, it is a question this time, I promise, and a quick one. What size teams, organisations have you used this with? Do you have a vision as to what size teams, organisations it's most, or types of teams, organisations it's most effective for?
So far, so good, with up to about 300 people, from individual to team of 7 to department of 20 to value stream of 150 to department of 300. It seems to be working.
Could you imagine it scaling beyond that, do you think? Or do you think
I don't see why not. The test would be to keep it high level enough. So if you're talking multiple thousand people organisation, first you've got to think about who's involved in growing that tree and creating that tree. How much co-creation and collaboration do you want in that? And also keeping it high level enough that you haven't got 8,000 branches, but you are still keeping it to a few branches at that high level and going from there.
at that level of scale, often the trick or the challenge is kind of like getting alignment right, and kind of an aligned autonomy. And it feels like this might be a good tool for kind of just that clarity, like instilling that, having that clarity of alignment of purpose. But was that part of kind of what led to the development of this tool in the first place, perhaps?
It certainly has been. I've been working with some of the data teams in BT. What really helps with alignment is because the value grows from the roots. So rather than, again, starting with the quarter and going, right, I'm going to write an OKR. Right, here's our objective, key results. And we sort of scrabble around and we go, well, this would be useful. And it doesn't really connect. If you start with the roots and go, ultimately, this is what's valuable to the organization. And every OKR, every team is working to some slice of that value, then you actually start to get alignment, rather than starting the other way around, which is, I'm going to just do something I think's valuable. Just starting from what's in the roots, what slice of that will you achieve by getting to that endpoint?
Yeah, nice. Starting with why, as somebody once said.
Yeah.
I have a question. Have you ever done this with a real tree?
Not yet.
It'd work. It's like perfectly compatible with COVID. Take everyone outside.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be nice, right? I have stared at the tree in my back garden many times, looked at it and goes, how does that work? Does that fit there? You know, I'm not green-fingered in any way, shape, or form. So the thought of anyone asking sort of anything horticultural about the metaphor, like, oh, I'm going to get stuck here. But this is a tree. That picture, that's a tree. Mondrian, early Cubism.
Very nice.
Big fan. Why not?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Yeah, and just check, are there any other questions that we got for Sam, or any other just ponderings about the outcomes tree, or the experiences that kind of got him to that point, whether they be horticultural ones or... No, brilliant. In which case, thank you so much, Sam, for bringing us that. I think everybody's really enjoyed it. Yeah, it's definitely been food for thought for me, and I know that a lot of people have, after doing this, have gone ahead and like run it, which is great, because it means that there's loads of more purpose-aligned organizations and teams out there. So it's wonderful that you're able to kind of have that ripple effect. So yeah, like I said at the beginning, we don't yet have anything lined up for next month, so do drop us any ideas of things that you particularly like to see. I know we saw something about DevOps and we saw something about Agile games, so we'll get our thinking caps on around that. Also, if anybody's interested in the idea of doing talks or lightning talks, then yeah, absolutely do get in contact with us, because I think, again, that could be a really cool thing for us to do next time. Yeah. And thank you, Andrea, and John as well. So yeah, thanks to Ewan and John, and yeah, thanks all to you for coming. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot, everyone, for coming. Thanks a lot, Sam.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheerio.